Rokeya. I do not know how old I was. The picture of a beautiful young sari-clad woman on the wall of my aunt's living room fascinated me. She was well covered, looked serene and extremely dignified. Her quest for knowledge was evident from the book she carried. I noticed that the women in the family spoke of her with great fondness, and before I knew anything further, I had started to develop a strange admiration for her. This was Rokeya Sakhaut Hussain. Rokeya was a social reformer, a prolific writer, a great thinker, a philosopher, a committed feminist, a campaigner of women's rights and freedom, a leader and pathfinder for Bengali Muslim women. She broke all barriers, struggled throughout her life for a better society, and led the way to empowering and enlightening women. We are deeply indebted to this unique and extraordinary personality whose contributions to society are immeasurable. Born in 1880 in Paraband, a village in the northern part of Bangladesh, then in undivided colonial British India, her father, Zahiruddin Muhammad Abu Ali Sabir, was a wealthy zamindar or landlord. Her mother was Rahatun Nisa Sabira Chaudhurani. Their family home stood in the middle of a vast estate, about 120 acres, surrounded by dense woods, frequented by wild animals. She grew up there with her two older brothers, Ibrahim and Khalil, an older and a younger sister, Karimunnisa and Humayra. In Rokeya's own words, in this natural rural environment, they did not need a clock. The song of the birds woke them at dawn. The howling foxes reminded them that it was dusk and prayer time. The end of the 19th century was a dark age for the Muslims of undivided India. The previous glories had been eroded and much of the wealth lost. Society was embroiled in superstition. Women had no education, rights or freedom. They remained secluded within the walls of their home from birth to death in a suffocating environment. Rokeya's two brothers, Ibrahim and Khalil Sabir, had exposure to Western education and the opportunity of learning English. They studied at Kolkata's elitist St. Xavier's College. The sisters, on the other hand, were deprived from learning even their own mother tongue Bangla. English was completely forbidden. They were only allowed to read the Quran, some Urdu and Persian. It was probably from the journals that the brothers read that Rokeya's sharp and intuitive mind picked up the message that there needed to be a change in society. Rokeya never went to school. There was no encouragement from the family for education. On the contrary, the relatives criticized and abused her for the desire to learn. Both Rokeya and Ibrahim were determined that she should continue to study. He taught her secretly under candlelight when the rest of the household was in deep slumber. The seclusion of women and disadvantaging them through extreme forms of parda was unacceptable, said Rokeya, and fought against it. In her own writings, she quotes that when she was 5, she was not allowed to be seen by any male non-member of the family. Men were not allowed to enter the inner quarters. It was not only restricted to that, she even had to hide from women who were outsiders. Young Rokeya could not understand the reason and wondered why. Rokeya moved from childhood to adulthood. She could not accept the subordination of women, the injustice and discrimination. There had to be a way out. At the age of 18, Rokeya's brothers arranged her marriage with Khan Bahadur Sakhaut Hussain, a deputy magistrate from distant Bihar. Sakhaut was highly educated and progressive, a real gentleman. Her brothers knew that he would appreciate and support Rokeya in achieving her quest to enlighten and educate women, change society. Sakhaut, a widower with a young daughter, was much older than Rokeya. Rokeya's mother saw Sakhaut for the first time at the wedding Apparently, she fainted and said that her sons had betrayed her. She would never forgive them for their unequal marriage for her young and beautiful daughter. Rokeya left for Bihar. She was miles away from her family in a completely different environment. It was hard, adjusting to a new way of life. Sakhaut loved Rokeya dearly, and with his support and encouragement, she progressed with her studies and gradually established herself as a writer. Rokeya's married life with Sakhaut lasted only about 10 or 11 years. Sakhaut suffered from diabetes and died in 1909. Towards the end, he had become blind. At the time of his death, he left 10,000 rupees specifically for setting up a school to educate Muslim women. Rokeya wrote a range of articles, books, short pieces, and social critical essays. Her works were published in various magazines and journals. She wrote mainly in Bangla. Her fantasy fiction, Sultana's Dream, written in English, was a satire. Through her writings, Rokeya expressed her views and vision. She spoke of religion, parda, seclusion, women's oppression by a patriarchal society, the right for education, and equality. Freedom can only be achieved through economic independence, said Rokeya. 100 years ago, she spoke about the environment, harnessing solar energy for cooking and operating machines, an issue so relevant in today's context and global warming. Rokeya believed in a secular society where people of all faiths, caste, and creed lived side by side in harmony. In Sultana's Dream, Rokeya talks about Ladyland. Sultana goes for a walk with her friend sister Sarah in Ladyland, a world ruled by women, where women are free and men are behind seclusion. In Ladyland, says Rokeya, men are in their proper places, where they ought to be. Men are shut indoors. The roles are reversed. Whilst men are busy making arms, women focus on education and their intellectual development. Sultana's Dream has been compared to Swift's Gulliver's Travels in the land of Lilliputians. In her Oborod Bashini, Behind Seclusion, she tells many true stories. Among them, she speaks of a woman from a rich and aristocratic background who was traveling by train with her maid. She caught the end of her long trailing burqa and slipped from the platform onto the rails. Her maid screamed that no one was to touch her mistress. She desperately tried to drag her body, but failed. The men at the station stood and looked. The train came and crushed her. The life of a woman was far less important than her parda. Following the death of Sakhaut, Rokeya set up a school in Bihar in his name with only 5 students. The daughter of Sakhaut's first wife created problems. Later, Rokeya decided to move to Kolkata. She was very lonely and had lost her 2 daughters after birth. Despite the personal tragedies, she continued. It was a big step and life was not easy for the young widow. In March 1911, Rokeya established Sakhaut Memorial School with 8 students and 2 benches. It's interesting to note that parallel movements were taking place in Europe for women's rights. With time, the number of students grew and the school moved to a new venue. Unfortunately, Rokeya lost the money Sakhaut had left for the school. The investment bank failed. Desperate, Rokeya raised funds bit by bit, using every possible means. There were schools for women of other faiths in Kolkata. Muslim women were not able to access them and were being left behind. Rokeya was determined that all women should have an education. In establishing her school, she walked from door to door to get students. She was not always welcome. Frequently, the parents would shut the doors on her face. She was often asked if there would be parda for their 5-year-olds in her school. Rokeya worked tirelessly to develop and extend her school and impart modern education. She had never been to school herself. How was she to know about running a school? She developed her networks with other women and learned from their experience. Muslim women teachers, particularly Bangla-speaking teachers, were difficult to come across. Rokeya's staff included women of various faiths. The school later added a residential hostel. She also organized a bus to transport the girls. It is said that not all sections of the community welcomed her initiative. She received criticism and abuse from many quarters. The students enjoyed their newfound freedom within the walls of the school. During their journey to school, in long dark burqas, in a bus enclosed in curtains, they would often be sick and in the heat and suffer from claustrophobia. There would be criticism if the curtains were moved slightly to make a little gap for air. It would make headline news the following day. There were 2 women attendants in the bus to look after the students during the journey. The parda was such that it was not acceptable for the voices of women to be heard by the outside world. The 2 women communicated with the girls in the bus by signing. Rokeya Memorial School still stands today as one of the top grade schools in Kolkata. The students are of all denominations and it is run as a state school by the West Bengal government. The school has recently celebrated its 100th anniversary with pomp and grandeur. Alongside establishing the school in 1916, Rokeya was deeply involved in setting up a voluntary organization, Anjuman-e-Khawatin-e-Islam. The aim of the organization was to promote the welfare of Muslim women and encourage them to develop themselves so that they could be good citizens and acquire their rightful position in society. Rokeya visited women in the slums and deprived areas of Kolkata. Rokeya supported many women, young and old, widows who needed help desperately, girls who required financial assistance for their education, women who were helpless and poverty-stricken. She encouraged their education and training, which helped to lead them into economic independence. If you educate a man, you educate a man. If you educate a woman, you educate a family. Rokeya suffered criticism and abuse. Nothing could stop her. She received letters of commendation from various non-Muslim women leaders. Clad in a burqa, Rokeya spoke at a meeting in Aligarh in 1925 regarding gender discrimination and challenged the menfolk. Rokeya died in December 1932. Sadly, the fundamentalists did not allow her to be buried in Kolkata. She was too progressive for them. She was laid to rest in a family cemetery 20 kilometers away. For me, there's a personal link with Rokeya that goes back 3 generations. My Nanu, my mother's aunt. Writer M. Fatima Khanum was a colleague of Rokeya and taught at her school. Fatima was married when she was 11. She lived with her husband, who was a doctor, and her in-laws in a village in Bangladesh. By the time she was 14, she had 2 boys. The family was very orthodox in their outlook. She was behind seclusion and extremely frustrated. Fatima would not be able to change them. She took a very bold step. She left her husband with her 2 young children and returned to her parents in Dhaka. She devoted her time studying by herself and started to write in magazines. It was sheer luck that Rokeya happened to read her stories. There was an immediate rapport. They communicated through letters, and soon Fatima was off to Kolkata to join Rokeya's school as a teacher. Fatima was the first Bengali Muslim teacher in her school. My father's only sister, Shamsun Nahar Mahmud, saw Rokeya as her role model and mentor. She was her protégée. Shamsun Nahar wrote Rokeya's first biography, Rokeya Jiboni, in 1936, and spent her life promoting Rokeya's ideals and carrying her banner. Shamsun Nahar was stopped from going to school at the age of 11. The family promoted education, but society prohibited it. She continued her studies at home. An elderly male tutor was appointed, but she never saw him. They were separated by a screen. Under the screen, the exercise books went backwards and forwards between her and the tutor. Shamsun Nahar wrote in magazines about her plight. Once again, Rokeya happened to read it. She contacted her, and that was the beginning of a new era for Shamsun Nahar. She met Rokeya and followed her footsteps. In 1936, Shamsun Nahar was awarded an MBE for her contributions for the emancipation of women. She was involved with the move for the introduction of women's voting rights in India. She was also a writer and subsequently went into politics. It's interesting how like-minded women got in touch those days. The dot-com era of today was nearly a century away. My mother, Anwara Bahar Chaudhuri, had the privilege of being a student of Rokeya. She went to Sakhat Memorial School during the 1930s and subsequently became the principal of the school. She was in that position until the partition of India in 1947. My sister, Professor Selina Bahar Zaman, who passed away not long ago, was a researcher on Rokeya. Such was her passion that she published a book with articles on various aspects of Rokeya from nearly 80 women who were linked to her school or had an interest in her. They include a wide range of women from academics to housewives. These family links inspired me. I took up a non-traditional profession, architecture. Rokeya's thoughts were many, many decades ahead of her time. She was a visionary who thought of issues that are very pertinent in today's world. I pledged to promote Rokeya in the West, where she is virtually unknown. I did presentations on Rokeya at various events, wrote articles, showed films, and did a sketch from Sultana's Dream. I did a lecture organized by Vishwa Sahitya Kendra and Alternative Arts in this very hall on International Women's Day several years back. In 2007, I went to the States and lectured on Rokeya in Washington, D.C. People were amazed to hear about this iconic figure. I received encouragement to do further work. Soon after, I embarked on a partnership project with Rose Bufford College of Theatre and Performance, Tara Arts and Mohila Sangho, a Bangladeshi women's group that I chair. We produced a play titled Rokeya's Dream, based on her life and the satire Sultana's Dream, written by her. The play was directed by Mukul Ahmed. The success of the play led to another opportunity. We were invited to visit Tagore's Vishwa Bharati and Rabindra Bharati universities and Bardhaman University in West Bengal. We also attended the centenary celebrations of Sakhat Memorial School in 2010. I went with a team of 3 Bruford graduates, Ray Lever, Claudia Heli, and Alia Wilson, who worked with me on the play, and Showmi, who was the choreographer. Here is Showmi and Claudia with me today. It was an incredible experience. East met West. The Indian Express wrote, Britons helped Bengal students rediscover one of the early feminist icons of South Asia. On our return, the team, with encouragement from Julian Bryant, Director of Community Outreach, Rose Bufford College, formed a collective, the Rokeya Project. Their aim is to promote Rokeya globally. They have been working with various schools and presented their first production, The Sounds of Silence, based on 6 stories from Omrod Bashini, and this was quite recent. In Kolkata, an organization titled River, Rokeya Institute of Value Education and Research, has been formed by a group of academics. My passion for Rokeya continues. She had won the hearts and minds of many people from all faiths and stratas of the community through her dedication and struggles. She had laid the foundations for progress and women's freedom. She has left behind a feminist manifesto for women. In Bangladesh today, Rokeya Day is observed on the 9th of December. A university has been named after her in Rangpur. The 2 women's halls of residence of Dhaka University have been named after Rokeya and her disciple Shamsul Nahar. They stand side by side, an appropriate tribute. Women have progressed, but there is a long way to go. Grameen and Professor Yunus's microcredit would have delighted Rokeya. We need many more Rokeyas. She was our pathfinder and will be immortal in our history. We salute her. I will end with a brief poetry that I wrote about Rokeya some while back. I looked at Rokeya, the inspiration she brought, over a century later, for everything she fought. Don't learn your language, evil it will lead. Stay behind secluded, unable to read. Parda and veil, the order of the day, imposed by religion, that's what men say. Freedom, oh freedom, we suffocate in the dark, oppressed by men, but we did make our mark. Women magistrates and judges, if only we could be, but we have done better, just look round and see. Don't you oppress us, we demand our right. In Rokeya's ladyland, men couldn't rule with might. You dreamt of cohesion among women of all creed. Together we'll work to create the world we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaheen. I hope by now, those of you who didn't know Rokeya, you have a good understanding of who Rokeya was and what she stood for. In the Rokeya Project, we concentrate on spreading Rokeya's message through dance and theatre. I myself, I look after the dance side of things, and Claudia looks after the theatre side of things. As Auntie Shaheen mentioned, our last production was called Sounds of Silence, and we had chosen 6 stories from Rokeya's series of short stories from Obrod Bashimi, Behind Seclusion, and we had produced a dance theatre piece. And within that dance theatre piece, we had an element of shadow puppetry, which is something else that we, or should I say, Claudia specialises in. Now, what we've done today is we have taken a very small extract from our last production, and we have adapted it for today's presentation, as there was dancers as well as actors and actresses involved in the production, but today we've just stuck to shadow puppetry, and we will show you that very small extract, and the story is called Girl at the Window. So I hope you enjoy, and after that we have a film for you.
The Girl at the Window. A wealthy landowner was visited by a group of traveling entertainers. Being a generous man, he invited them into his home and proceeded to host a performance for all the locals. People flocked to the performance, and the house was filled with laughter and fun. Followed the local custom and hung large dark curtains over the windows to hide his family. Upstairs, hidden from view, the man was rocking his beloved daughter to sleep. She could hear the party downstairs and longed to see the bright colors of the costumes as the performers danced in the courtyard. However, the nanny noticed a gap between the curtains. She gave in through curiosity, and with the child sleeping soundly in her arms, she peeked through the window. It was a little too far, and the father saw the outline of his dearest daughter at the window. A rage swept through him as he rushed to the nursery. The nanny was too well thrown by the dance that she did not see him enter the room. Before she realized, the father had snatched his daughter from her. He began to beat her viciously, and the little girl woke to see the man. She called father in a blind rage. She cried out, and only then did the man realize she had been silent, peaceful, and asleep. The man could not face what she had done. He could not look at his daughter, his beloved Jew, whom he had accused. Now, through no fault of her own, her reputation was undone.
Illustration of actually not only what was in Sounds of Silence, but also what we do in schools. We have been in lots of schools around London, a couple in Tower Hamlets, and we actually have been talking to them about Rokeya and about the issues that she raised awareness for. And through this, through shadow puppetry, we've been actually working with students to work creatively towards making productions and making things to actually illustrate Rokeya's work and what she promoted. So, thank you for watching. We do have the film on Rokeya's life. If you wish to watch that, it is 30 minutes long, so we're aware about time, or we could do a question and answer and open debate.
The question and answer is better.
Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Yes. Rokeya, I think you presented the exact. Because Madam, to correct me if I'm wrong, that now in the society we're facing two problems. The first speaker addressed it. There's a question of identity. Are you modern or are you Muslim? So I think Rokeya was the then, way before our time, made a balance between these two. She was modern and Muslim at the same time. But now I believe, unfortunately, some of the organizations in Bangladesh are misrepresenting. She did not, I think she did not rebel against the principles, but the abuse or the misrepresentation of the principles. And I think more we read about her and represent her, this should be that she was the perfect balance between these two identities.
You are absolutely right, because Rokeya was extremely pious. Extremely pious. She said her prayers 5 times a day. If you see any photograph of her, I think there's one in the film. I mean, she always covered her head. She wore long sleeve blouses, and she worked with men. And she said, that is not the problem. But the problem is that men interpret religion for their own use, and that's what puts women behind. Because if you say modern, Islam is a modern religion. Islam gave women the right to property. And if you think of the Prophet, his wife, Bibi Khadija, ran a business, and the Prophet was employed by her. So, where were women? He took his daughters to war with him, his wife and daughter. So, Islam is a modern religion, but it's just the way people project it, and that's given Islamophobia, and given Islam a very bad name, which is very, very sad. And in Islam, education has always been promoted. The religion never ever says, don't study. Education has been promoted, and Rokeya has said throughout that education is the key. If we educate women, we educate everybody. But she was against human rights because, this woman fell on the tracks and nobody lifted her. Her life wasn't important because of Parda. What Parda? And she talked about a fire. There was a fire in the house, in the inner quarters of this Zamindar's house. And the women were all inside. They didn't come out. They all burnt. So, what is that? I have worked with men all my life, and I have, always dressed modestly. The Quran says dress modestly, and the Quran also says that to women. And I don't want to have a religious debate here. I'm not qualified. But, the way I interpret the Quran is that yes, Quran has given us the right. Quran has given women a good position.
She presented the perfect balance between these two.
Exactly. I mean, she said her prayers. She died early morning after saying her Fajr prayers. And she never said anything against religion. She said against people who interpreted the religion in a wrong way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam. Very closely connected with what the young man said. Why then, Rokeya in our study, this Colin University, has been promoted as a kind of secular, anti-religious figure, and for the emancipation of the woman, we could follow her as opposed to the Islamic principle. Why the feminists in Bangladesh has promoted Rokeya in such a way? Because I heard quite different what you said.
Yeah.
In Bangladesh, the structure was quite different.
I don't know, I've been away from Bangladesh for the last 40 years, so I couldn't tell you how they're promoting Rokeya, but I can tell you about my own aunt, who actually, from the age of 11, she was supposed to observe Parda, and she wanted to study. I said that in my presentation, that she had a tutor who was 80 years old, and she had to pass the books underneath the screen. She, with all that, she did her MA, she was teaching at a college in Kolkata. She traveled all over the world. She met the Queen, all the high flyers, and she died in the early 60s, and she was a member of parliament at that time as an independent candidate. So, it doesn't mean, and she actually idolized Rokeya. She promoted Rokeya, but she always said that secularism is for everybody. Secularism, we live here, we live in...
anti-religious, because of the...
No, she is not anti-religious.
That's how she has been portrayed.
I don't know who's portraying her as anti-religious. She is not anti-religious. You find, people say all sorts of things about the Quran, and the people who say, I tell them, have you read the Quran? Oh, sorry, I haven't read it. So how can you say something when you haven't read it? Who is promoting this? I don't know.
Just one thing, the different people can get inspiration from Rokeya. Some people, atheists could get inspiration from secular, whatever. Yeah? So if they find her inspiration and they want to promote her, right? And that's up to them. What she's saying, this is what Rokeya's personality was. Right? But I can get inspiration from Newton, or Einstein, or whoever. So it's like that. Sorry, it was Einstein.
Assalamualaikum, thanks for that. It really made it quite real. One question would be related to this, but the main question isn't. Begum Rokeya, she lived in a time when you didn't get all this NGO politics, Millennium Development Goals. I call it developmentia. So she gets used as a marketing tool, and it gets played to the politics. But I was really interested in, in Ladyland,
yes,
when the scientists, the feminist science policy, right? Conflict resolution and solar energy, this kind of thing. Knowledge creation is really important for a country like Bangladesh because we're living in an imperialistic world. How do you see these kinds of projects, the projects of a fiction projects? How are they carrying on? I mean, we've got these people. They do this Birgiri with her. She's one figure. We follow what she says. She's a marketing device. But the actual idea of how do women propose to resolve the problems of the world? How do you get that through in Bangladesh?
Well, I think in Bangladesh, one of the key things is education. Because all these years, women were so cut off. One thing the mobile telephone has done is reached women in the village, education. I'll give you a little example, okay? I'm probably going off tangent, but I think it's very important. Grameen worked with women, and the Grameen phone was actually introduced in Bangladesh with a company in Norway called Telenor. So the boss of Grameen comes to Bangladesh, and he hears that the women in the villages have got mobile telephone and they can communicate, and in a village lots of people go abroad, so if the woman has a phone, the villagers can use the phone to contact their relatives abroad, and that will generate income for her. So this gentleman from Telenor, the boss, goes to the village and speaks to this woman. She says, I want to see the women who are being empowered. So through an interpreter, he talks to the woman and says, well, I want to talk to my wife in Oslo. Can you get my wife? So she says, cut. Yes, he talks to his wife. And then she says, yes, the bill is X takas, 200, 300 takas. He pays the taka to her. And then she says to the interpreter, sir, if I ring you in Oslo, will you speak to me? So this man says, through the interpreter, yes, here's my card and here's my number. If you want to speak, do please give me a ring. And then she says, no, I don't need your number. I can retrieve it from the mobile phone. So this is what education does. The sky is the limit. So in Bangladesh, women should be able to think freely. All these women who have got microcredit, there's a lot of controversy going on in Bangladesh at the moment. I'm sorry, I don't want to indulge in politics, but millions of women have been empowered by education, by managing their own, business. So women can do, given the opportunities. I actually, for my own life, I wanted to do something different. And Rokeya inspired me. I wanted to go into architecture, right? And I studied in the University of Engineering and Technology, which is today called BUET. And when I went to study in BUET, they had never seen the face of a woman before. I went and I said I wanted to be admitted. Right? You want to be admitted? how can you be admitted? You know, you were the only woman. So, right, 3 of us got together and we planned that we will sit for the entrance exam. Fortunately, at that time, the department was being set up in collaboration with Texas A&M University. The Americans were setting up the department. So we went there, the Americans welcomed us, we took the admission test, we passed. We entered the university. And quite honestly, we were like animals in a zoo. People used to come to see us. Who are these 3 women freaks? And then we found that we had to work at the university all night because the boys were all living in the hostel and they used to do their drawings which were set up. We didn't have CAD those days, which was set up on the drawing board, and they used to sit there and do their work all night. And if we went home, then we missed the whole night, we couldn't catch up. So right, we will stay. And we didn't have any problems. But that was a big decision. We took a decision that yes, we wanted to do architecture, we wanted to do a non-traditional profession. And we did it.
What year is that?
I took admission in 1962, I'm ancient. So,
Rokeya did a daring job at that time.
yes.
When she died, she wasn't allowed to be buried in Calcutta. She had to be her body.
Well, that was the fundamentalist.
This is what I'm saying. I was going to say that she actually took a challenge, and she thought it was her job at that time. It's like communalism. When
Yes.
he was told that he's not a Muslim.
Yes,
We all remember that. Now we worship him as
the national poet.
exactly, yes. But what I'm saying now is Rokeya's work nowadays are there people still opposing her work?
I don't think so. No. And the other thing I was trying to tell you is that Rokeya not only wrote about the injustice in the Muslim community, she also wrote about the injustice in the Hindu community because of dowry. And if you read her literature, she has, and even in, she's got a story, Delicia's something, about an English woman, whose husband murdered her for money or something. So she talks about, and in her Poddorak, she talks about this place where there were women of all race, caste and creed. And they were all being abused in different ways. So it's not only women, you see in this country we wouldn't have all the Equalities Commission and we wouldn't have the Women's Equalities Department in the local authorities if there was equality. Women are still discriminated against in the West. In Switzerland, women got the vote only a few years back, not that long ago. So women have always been second-class citizens wherever they are. So that is her fight. But she's very religious. She never said once undermine your religion. She says be religious, but within the religious context, you can establish your rights, you can get educated, you can change the world. That was her dream.
Thanks for that wonderful presentation. I guess I was thinking, how can Rokeya's ideas be applied and how is it used to the Bangladeshi women who live in London and in the West? Because one of the things that I guess we're thinking about education of women and look at how Hamlet we're in this borough at the moment, how can those ideas be useful to women in the borough? Do you work with the local?
So how do you work, to take these ideas forward to the local boroughs within the... I think the schools can do something about promoting Rokeya, because some years back they were doing a Bengal box, the Humanities Resource Center in Hamlet. They were doing a Bengal box, they had a box in which they put a lot of things. And I actually met the person who was doing that, promoting that. And I said to her, why don't you have something about Rokeya? And she actually had a copy of Sultana's Dream in that. And it was, so women don't know. I mean, I actually went to the women's library some years back. And I talked to the librarian. And as I was coming out, there was this Bangladeshi young girl sitting at reception. And she said to me, Auntie, why did you come? I've never seen Bangladeshi women coming to the library. So I said, I came to talk about Rokeya Sakhaut Hussain. I'm doing a lecture on Rokeya. She said, who's Rokeya? So I had a book and I showed her. You wouldn't believe her face changed completely. She said, oh my God, there was somebody in our community 100 years ago who did this, who talked about solar energy. Oh my God, I didn't know. I mean, immediately, she saw Rokeya as a role model. She said, we don't have role models. And when we actually went to India, one of our team members, really, but she's not here today, we actually did some presentations at Bardhaman University, and it was about women and culture. And she actually said that Rokeya can be a role model for Western women. So then one of the academics stood up, because they were all academics there, from Delhi University or somewhere, and she said, what do you mean? Can you explain this? So she said, of course I can explain this. She said, British girls, young British girls, their role model, they want to be wags. You know, the footballers, they want to be their girlfriends. And Jodie, or is it Jodie or Jade? Jade. So, you know, that is their aspiration. They want to be that. And then this lady, she went completely dumb, quiet. And she's a professor there. So, you see, we see Rokeya as a woman who actually faced the world as she was, and she says that everybody has got qualities, and you just need to develop them. And it's wrong to suppress, you know, people's abilities. And she also, you know, she was very kind and sympathetic, because in Sultana's Dream, she talks about asylum seekers, and that's also a current issue, because in this country, these men, they were actually kicked out of their country, and they were going to be killed. And they came to Ladyland, and they were being protected. And then the king said, you send them back. Because so he said, in Ladyland, we don't kill anybody. You know? So, if you think 100 years ago, how on earth a woman who was not allowed to come out of the house, how could she actually write all this? Education, she read. She read. And I've said in one place that, you know, she used to look at the journals that brothers used to get. And that probably gave her some idea, her inquiring mind, that studying is important. So, you know, I think I would ask my brothers here who have wives and children and sisters that they should encourage their sisters to study. And another thing Rokeya was opposed to was child marriage. Because even that she actually explained in the context of religion. Because those days girls were married at the age of 11, you know, 9, 10, 11. So she said, look, if you follow Islam, in Islam, a girl cannot be married without her consent, because there has to be, the girl has to be asked whether she wants to marry such and such, and there has to be a witness. So how can an 11-year-old, a minor, actually decide? So from that you can imply that yes, a girl has to be mature enough to make decisions, and that's what the Quran is saying.
But in a Muslim may always marry young girls, like 9,
Yeah.
10, 8.
Yeah, so that's
Just to be funny, we lost Dr. Salman if her solar energy idea was sound. It's a joke. Any other?
I think I've talked too much.
No.
I just wanted to ask about the poverty of the interested. Just where did it come from? There's a big argument in Malta Balinese sort of poverty.
Yes.
It was inspired by that.
Actually, it wasn't, but I later discovered it, and then that became an inspiration as well for other work that I've done. It actually came about. I was trying to do stuff that would actually be good for young children, sort of really tiny children, and this was my own personal practice. And I was creating puppets with them, doing lots of different puppets. And it was like shadow puppets was something that you could project your imagination into, and it wasn't here, it wasn't physical, it was somewhere there. And with sort of television screens and everything, it was just a completely different screen and a different relationship. So I started looking at shadows, but the silhouettes are so intricate. Your cutting has to be really precise and really on the mark, otherwise it just all goes wrong. So I started working with colours and building colours in, and I discovered a technique that actually had been around for years and years and years. And I discovered it through the Turkish Karagöz puppets, which are more sort of Punch and Judy puppets, and how they use leather and then sort of through tanning of the leather, it becomes thinner and thinner and thinner, and then they paint the leather. And they create these sort of Punch and Judy-like puppets that are see-through, but are still seen on a shadow. And so I researched different forms of doing that, and so created sort of paper using certain types of paper that you can get from W.H. Smith's and that sort of thing, and putting oil and working into colour into them. And so it's like I've actually discovered that every culture has a shadow screen sort of entertainment system, as it were. And I'm yet to discover, as I said earlier, another culture that hasn't. or doesn't use the flickering flame as a form of storytelling. And when I do, it'll be amazing because it'll be like, what do they use? But yeah, so that's why we used shadow screen, and particularly in Sounds of Silence, we had a multicultural cast to begin with, and they were all 25 above. So for, let's say, Kirsty, she was British, white, for her to play a 4-year-old Muslim child in India, in like 100 years ago, was a bit of an extreme. And then for our one male, Dwayne, who was this big black guy, to play the father was just one step too far. And then to add on to all of that, the story is actually very powerful. And if you start getting Kirsty and Dwayne doing the hitting, and even then it would be mock hitting, it would just be one stunt too far. And therefore unbelievable and almost ridiculous. So we then sort of pared it back, and I suggested traditional storytelling as shadow puppetry, and we actually incorporated that with dance and with the actors. So Dwayne would be on stage with the dancers that you saw as a shadow, and then he would come behind the screen, and then his puppet would come out, and he was dressed similarly to the puppet. And then the interaction, violent interaction, would be on the screen. And I don't know if anyone here was actually at the show. It was last year as part of the
Bengali drama season.
Thank you.
Which happens here every November.
And you could actually audibly hear a shock, because no one had actually seen puppets used in that way. And also it was, again, a removal. You were actually able to think about it instead of being drawn into the emotion. So that's kind of the reasoning behind the puppets and the reasoning behind using them in schools as well. I hope I answered your question.
Any other question? Last one, that's it.
I think I didn't answer.
No, I think this one.
Yes.
Where can we get her books and literature in English to read on about her life, things that you just mentioned?
Actually, it's very hard to get books here, but in Bangladesh there is I actually got a few books called of an organization called Women for Women. But you can get it on the from Amazon. I actually managed to buy 2 of her books, Poddorak, which has been translated into English by Dr. Barnita Bagchi of Kolkata. She I think works in Netherlands somewhere, she's a professor. She's translated Poddorak beautifully. So you can look through the internet, but not very many people actually sell books. Sorry, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to listen to your lecture because you are in the direct relationship with Rokeya, and we didn't know much Rokeya because she was so versatile, so unique, so progressive anyway. Now, Rokeya, there's Rokeya University, Rokeya Hall, but the problem is that, so how, because now for the speaker, you know that we project Rokeya for our own way. So how, you know Rokeya very well, and you have direct contact with the Rokeya. So how you could protect or the Rokeya's view and to not to abuse her. So,
well, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. The first thing is, in 1932, Rokeya died in 1932, right? And my aunt Shamsun Nahar wrote her biography in 1936, and that was because my grandmother said to her that you have seen Rokeya so closely and you know her story more than anybody else. So if you don't write her biography, you will be doing a great injustice to the Bengali society. So in 1936, she wrote her called Rokeya Jiboni, and that used to be a textbook for the matriculation students in Bangladesh during the Pakistani era, I remember. Yes, pre-Bangladesh, I don't know what happened afterwards. And that book is still available. And Bangla Academy actually printed all her complete works, Rokeya Rajanabali. And in India they are trying to promote Rokeya. Her school is trying, and this group of academics, they have got this group called River, Rokeya Institute of Education. I'm driving my small way. Some of Rokeya's former students, former students of Sakhaut School, they are now in their 70s, 80s in Bangladesh. I noticed that they were trying to promote Rokeya. But I don't know if people are promoting Rokeya for their political agenda. I don't know. In Bangladesh, that happens quite frequently.
I think people do everywhere, and this is a free world.
Yeah, so you can.
Everything.
That's right.
People do what they want, and they can find inspiration in whoever. I think your job is to try and be as accurate as possible, and
well, I've been trying. I'm a solitary reaper, lone ranger, and now these people have joined. They have formed the Rokeya Project, which is great because it's for the young generation now to carry the banner.
You mentioned 1925. There was a speech that she did at the Aligarh Muslim University.
Yes.
What was in the speech?
She spoke about women's gender discrimination, that women should have rights to education and all that.
Is the script of her speech there, or somebody recollected?
No, I don't know. But somebody, actually, the film that I was going to show you, that was done by a lady called Bani Dotto in Kolkata, and she did an extensive research because they will actually tell you that when we went to Kolkata, there are people there who are spending their life on Rokeya and doing research, and like Dr. Miratul Nahar. There are people, so they have actually researched. A lot of things I didn't know myself, and when I actually read the film, I realized my aunt Shamsul Nahar was only 24, and when the fundamentalists said that she was not to be buried in Kolkata, and because they couldn't keep the body, because we have to bury the body as quickly as possible, because while all the argument was going on, the body would decompose, so she had to be buried. But she actually wrote in the newspapers. She was 24 herself, a woman who was 24, actually challenged in the newspapers that why did they not allow Rokeya to be buried in Kolkata.
Are you using a modern term like fundamentalist to describe certain Muslim religious leaders in Kolkata?
That's it. Well, people who were very, they actually called themselves that they were very religious people, but they were actually religious fanatics.
No, what I mean, like fundamentalist is a modern term.
Modern term.
But you have somebody who is not fundamentalist is a modern term, still might be very religious and stop.
Could be. I don't know. I'm not actually putting a right definition, but that was what was actually quoted.
What's the name of that documentary we would have seen? Can we get hold of it somewhere?
No. Because that was given to me by the person who filmed it, She herself is 80 years old now. So when I went to Kolkata, because I was doing my own research on Rokeya. And
so we can't see it anywhere?
Well, I don't know if you have time today to see it, I don't know.
Maybe at the end we'll turn it on. If anybody wants to stay, they can if they're still here. Well, if they trust me with the video.
We'll get hold of it.
It's very hard. As I said, I have got only one CD. And that, I treasure.
We can organize the show. And she can present the show in the future.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah?
Or encourage the person to put it online.
I'm very good at organizing film shows.
You've got second
More
language.
responsibility.
Any more questions or contribution? I think we will finish it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I do apologize because I get very emotional.
No, it's very good.